And I just realized I did that entire intro, guys, with no camera and no mic. That was beautiful. All right, guys, welcome to our next session on building a community led growth engine. It is my pleasure to bring you Rebecca Marshburn, head of community at Common Room, and Bruno Estrella, the director of growth marketing, at Clay. So over to you guys.
That was a fantastic dress rehearsal. Thank you so much for having us. So yes, building a community growth engine. Notice how on the slide we just have it titled "Building a Growth Engine" because Bruno and I have, as you might have guessed, met before we're having this chat together, and we see community as one piece of building a super strong, enduring, and sustainable growth engine. And so we're going to talk about that today. We get to introduce each other, which is so exciting. This is like a non-panel panel where we're really just sort of fireside chatting each other's interviewer and interviewee. So I'm excited that I get to introduce Bruno Estrella. He's the head of growth marketing at Clay, as Gina said. Before Clay, Bruno led growth at Webflow. So obviously, these two companies are known for their communities of accomplished and fervent builders. This is something I admire so much about every Clay creator I see and every Clay partner I see, their fervency. And also known like for building dedicated fans and community members. So Bruno's About Me section on LinkedIn says, I like to solve problems around user acquisition, retention and engagement and monetization. And I share that not to read his profile verbatim, although I do think that is chef's kiss of like very direct, very about me on LinkedIn. But I share it to emphasize the title of this conversation that we're going to have because it's about building a growth engine. And yes, we're going to look at it through a lens of community, but also so much more than that, how community and the go to market motions that influences and informs should work together to ultimately drive business growth. So that's what we're going to do today. That's Bruno Estrella.
Awesome. Thank you, Rebecca. I'm gonna have to match that. So I'm super stoked to be here and join you, Rebecca. And I think the interesting thing about Rebecca in general is like if you look at her LinkedIn profile too, her background is on product marketing, content, and UX in general. And it just shows that community is a role that it's not only about the this specific denomination. It's about how you think of your customers and the experience of your customers and how it attaches to your business. So I'm really excited for us to dive deep into how community strategies in general can bring business growth.
Yeah, let's do it. You ready?
Awesome. Let's do it.
Cool. So the first thing we're going to dive into, and I think this is something that I constantly wonder about, ask about, read about. If you guys are given an interview, I'm reading it. What are some of Clay's strategies for building a thriving community? And when you and I chatted, outside of these two little boxes that we see here, you talk about product strategy, business model approach, and then how to earn prioritization. And so I want to tee you up with those things in mind.
Yeah. I think it's a very interesting question. I think like community in general, people tend to think of we can kind of, I don't know, create a newsletter or a Slack channel or something. But I think that the main thing that comes to mind is like looking at Clay as a product, right? Clay is a self-serve product with a big PLG motion. So users stand so like from a community perspective, and similar to Webflow, as you said, Rebecca, is we need to drive a lot of product usage and engagement, right? And that's the kind of the focus of the community here is like how can we get people to go back into the product and build workflows in Clay. And Clay specifically is a very flexible and powerful tool, right? You when you're logging into a product is sort of like this like blank spreadsheet UI that you can build very complex RevOps and growth workflows that would have taken you days back in the day. You can do in minutes now. So people get in there, they join our community, and we incentivize them to get into the product and share those workflows that they built, because that in one way helps other members in the community to see what's possible within our product, and they can engage and show and position themselves as leaders in this specific space, right? And from a more like a qualitative point of view, this, you as the user, you build something that you would have taken you days back in the day, and now it takes you minutes. That has a sense of pride and ownership that then naturally translates into engagement and content creation in our community in general, right? So like more like tactically, knowing this background, we really double down on our partner ecosystem within our community. So as we, because of these product qualities, we started to get a lot of product market fit within agencies and freelancers, because they could move much faster and build workflows that they could never do it before, right? So how can we empower these people within our community to look even better, to make more money, and how can we really partner with them to help them grow, right? Because if they grow, we grow. So just like a small example, I meet with a lot of our community members on a weekly basis. I have like recurring weekly meetings with a lot of them to see like how, and a lot of these are like, how are you using the product? How can we make it better? But also, how can we help you as a business grow? And we have a lot of these chats. The other piece is like how, okay, one way for you to look better within our community is for to enable content creation, right? So how can we enable you to be known as this expert within your industry, and how can we actually make you distribute this content that you're creating that everyone should see? um so we that's where the creators program came from. That's where like the first point that I made was around the experts and the agencies. And then the other one is like, given we have a lot of momentum, and we have a lot of people joining our community, how can we make sure that these people are connecting outside of a digital world? So we actually launched this past couple months more than 30 global community meetups, um, for all the way from like cities like New York, but cities like Paris, London, so basically everywhere. And we're sort of like matching these people that are in similar stages within their journey. They are also trying to grow their business with other people, so they can meet and with our product in mind, right? So these are more the technical things that we did, but it comes from understanding our go to market approach. In our case, like a heavy PLG motion, and then how can we use our community to help our business grow in that way?
Something that
Yeah.
I love that you said actually at the very even at to start out your answer, right? Is you're like, ultimately we're hoping people will use the product. And I think there's this really big shift, especially so much I admire about what you've done with the clay community of creators, right? Like clay
Mhm.
makers, right?
Yeah.
Clay makers, clay
There's a lot of
agencies.
playmakers, clay
The
agencies.
clay agencies, there's so many. I was like, "Oh, man, that's a brilliant market." Like, the marketer in me is like, "That's so beautiful." Um, is this idea, right, of getting people to use the product. And I think there's this distinction, and we're gonna talk about this later, but, um, one way at Common Room that
Mhm.
we both fuel our inbound and our outbound motions, and we'll talk about that later, is through, like, LinkedIn as a channel and newsletters, Substacks, those sorts of things where people are sharing content. But what's happening there, well, it's there's so many things that I'm proud of about that program. But
Mhm.
what we're working with GTM partners who are creating awesome why content, right? Like, why are signals important? Do you need why do you need to like set up a TAM this way and then federate out like plays? Why do you need to experiment super quickly? Why do you need to move toward a more modern go to market tech stack, right? Like, there's a lot of excellent why content, and those are GTM partners or creators talking about, the why these types of tools, why a tool like Common Room is necessary. There's this other thing that you move toward, right? Which is when you're moving from audience to community, and this is something I think you've done so expertly, is then you're moving from the why to the how. And you're like, how do you actually get in here and use this product, right? And what your community of clay makers, of clay creators are doing is meeting with each other to be like, yeah, we know why we're trying to do this. And this is literally hands-on how. And then you have that, with your templates, infrastructure, and all those things that you've built at Clay. Your experts programs, right? Those are like even deeper clay makers that know what's going on. And so I guess I want to emphasize that here, right? Because from your very first sentence of your answer, you're like, hey, people are using the product. And I think that's so important in terms of what your community is doing, not only to empower each other better in the how, but also to empower new people who are getting started with clay to get to the how to use the product faster.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, exactly. And I think like what enables that is our business model, right? Which is like the self-serve PLG motion, which is like anyone can get into the product. So knowing that, that's how everything that's where you should start. Like if people can get started pretty easily, communities like should be centralized around your product, right? It was similar to how Webflow thought about it, which is like you can get in there, you can start building and sharing your learnings. So that's like I think that's sort of like the base of you should think of your business, and then think of like how you can leverage community to grow the business, right?
yeah, that's something that you had mentioned to me is right. You said, and I don't want to quote this exactly, so, like to earn prioritization within Clay, right? You have to bring the business impact. And so I'm wondering how do you look at prioritization today in terms of which programs are like, yeah, this is the impact we're looking for. And I imagine that changes over time and over seasons and over, um, feature releases and all kinds of things like that. But
Yeah, for us is like it's very known that we grow through community in Clay. Like, and community means like our, for example, our partner ecosystem, right? It's a big way of how we grow. So we know that. So, and this is very this is one of the first things I did after joining Clay is like as you join a startup, I think there's something I tend to say is that the most underrated question that people have is like how we grow, and people you kind of see that things are growing, like the business is growing, but how, like, what are the inputs that are driving this thing? And a lot of the times this is outside of typical marketing attribution. It's very much of like talking to the customer, and we have our ecosystem is how we grow. So investing there is always a priority for us, and these are the programs that we put together. And depending on the program, they have different types of business metrics that we pay attention. Right, one is more top of funnel, the other one is more bottom of the funnel. But yeah, it's always tailored to the business in general.
I imagine this is my last question before we move on, but we have like 45 minutes, so I'm so excited. I'm like, I'm just gonna, I just want to talk to Bruno. I imagine then, obviously, you applied that same type of at least a hypothesis, like when you launched your meetups, your global meetups, which is amazing.
Yeah,
Um, you obviously you have a hypothesis, you have like data to back it up. You're like, we're gonna try it, and then sometimes it works as expected, and sometimes it doesn't. But and I imagine you applied a similar framework, right, in terms of what we're gonna do with meetups and how we're gonna make sure that people are going deeper into the product and
yeah,
and how you're like undergirding that ecosystem. um, how is it going, right?
yeah,
And is it functioning as expected, right, in terms of building that ecosystem? And I imagine some people here actually have pretty tactical, like, how did you make
mhm,
these meetups happen at such a large scale?
yeah. I think like the funny thing is that like I think for the audience in general, like you're seeing us like on this like speaker stage and we sound sophisticated and stuff, but like the like, behind the curtains is very much like a mess and a lot of like struggle and a lot of hard work. So for community meetups is like, okay, we have this huge community. We know that they are global. We have an app, like we sort of like talk to them and we understood that there's an appetite for businesses for to have meetings and for them to actually meet each other. And if we were to centralize all of the events, we are the ones hosting it, like we can never surface our community, right? And then so that was kind of like the reasoning behind it. And after that is like connecting with them, understanding who wants to be community host, who wants to, what are the benefits that we want to give them. And I think like when it comes to actually like measuring impact here, like this is like one area that, for example, we shouldn't measure like, oh, what was the influence revenue from this meetup here, right? Like there's no point for us to doing this. This is like actually community engagement. And like the things that we measure is like how are people, how much, what's the NPS from these meetings, from these community events, what's the attendance for these, are we growing month over month, or like what's the cadence, what how are people talking about it. So there's like, that's why I mentioned there's like different types of programs for different types of areas of the business. One, like for example, our experts and agency partners, we actually can attribute the revenue, right, that people are bringing in. From community meetups, is like our is more like a product engagement and customer engagement point of view. Sure, we can have people that are first learning about clay and they join these, but it's more like about people meeting each other and solving problems together. And there's no point for us to try to over engineer a revenue target, even though like as you introduced me, like, oh, I look at retention, like monetization and growth in general. But there's like, you have to understand what are the inputs for these specific areas, and this one is mostly for like an engagement point of view, right? Are people getting to the product together, are they talking about us, but it's less about the revenue piece.
Yeah, I love that, and I think you're probably also touching on saying it without saying it, but touching on this long term versus medium term versus short term, right? Is
Yeah,
that there like how do you measure whether or not that meetup was successful? In the short term, we measured, would people come again? Did they
yeah,
learn something? Are they
yeah,
glad they came? Are
yeah,
they going to invite someone else next time? Right? That's short
exactly.
term. But ultimately, there's the hypothesis, and I think if we're both people that believe in community,
Yeah,
right, which I'm going to go out on a limb and say we do,
yeah,
that there's long term benefits that happen there too, which maybe if we look at that attribution over 6 months or
yeah,
3 quarters, 4 quarters, right? You are actually would be able to see influence.
yeah,
Some of it's going to get pretty gray by that long of a duration, but there's long-term benefits to it as well.
yeah,
But that's just, especially I think as startups, but anywhere, you're not necessarily going that far back in time. But there are
exactly.
punctuated moments where where you really can see this person came to a meetup and then that was their entry point into
Mhm.
working with us more, into
Yeah,
going deeper into the product, and actually ended up becoming a clay maker who
yeah,
has now worked with us to bring in 8 different clients. Um, so I think I love how you're looking at the short term, being like, we're not going to measure it short term based on direct revenue.
yeah,
But in the long term, there is a hypothesis as well that the more that we can help people have a great time while learning about our product also has long-term benefits.
exactly. Yeah, 100%.
Um, Now you get to be the interviewer and I get to
Yeah,
be the interviewee.
yeah. And I think like this kind of, that's a perfect segue to like, on what are the, I know we chatted about these specific metrics, short term, long term metrics, and I think like community intelligence is one area that people probably have a ton of questions. So I'd love to sort of like get your point of view on like how have you seen companies using community intelligence to like shape GTM motions. Yeah, love to hear more about it.
Yeah, I'll talk about a bit about the context of, how we started 4 years ago, 5 almost, at Common Room. But yeah, at first I felt like you saw me very deeply when you were like, we might seem sophisticated, but behind this is straight chaos. And you're like, oh my gosh, Bruno, don't tell them everything. No, but I think we all feel that way. So true. So I think what we believe at Common Room, right, is that the go-to-market tech stack has changed, the modern GTM motion has changed, and if it hasn't changed, then we should be looking at ourselves and be like, it should have changed by now. Um, the technology that was available in 1999, 2000, right? That was before there were 100 more ways that customers, community members, fans, like tire kickers, if I think that's what they call them, right? People testing out products. That was before they had 100 more ways to digitally talk with each other and digitally give like peer-to-peer reviews, understand how something is working, why something is working. And so now the tech stack reflects that, right? There are so many social channels, chat ways, forums, and that's where we started, is in that community space where it was specifically what we would now call like second party signals. And so there's like really quickly for an overview, there's first party signals, right? Which are going to be your owned signals. That's going to be your website visits, your CRM, your product usage data, the way that you decide to do your scoring based on what's important for your business. Then you have second party signals, which I'm going to come back to, which is really where we started as Common Room and then expanded into these other signal types. And that second party signal, right, is going to be chat. So like where are people actually talking to you, like, the Zendesks of the world, the intercoms. It's going to be social, right? It's going to be LinkedIn. It's going to be Twitter, X. It's going to be those forums, right? Discord, chat apps, right? So Slack, Discord. It's going to be those larger kind of public forums, those Reddits, those Stack Overflows. It's going to be repositories. So if you're in a developer community space or you serve a developer product, that's going to be mostly like the GitHub, right? Is the biggest one. The GitHub, capital T.
Yeah.
And so these signals, these second party signals, were someone would be forking your repo on GitHub and liking a post on LinkedIn and asking a question on Stack Overflow and joining your Discord community, and it'd all be anonymized and not unified, right? And so it was really hard at the time for community and DevRel leaders, but
Mm,
also just specifically anyone in the marketing, mostly in that like marketing customer facing space, even support and success space, right? To
mm,
understand who was talking to you, when, where, and what the urgency was, right? Is
uh,
this person someone who is a power user who's going to bring you into their organization, who's going to advocate for you internally, who also is going to change jobs in 4 months and is going to have economic buying power influence, and that place that your original champion left that company and now your contract's up for renewal in 4 months. Like, you need to know this stuff in
mm,
terms of understanding who someone is, who that person is, and then also how they're in fit into that larger contextual organization, or
mm,
account level like intelligence, right? About how that account is in the landscape of your business, right? And
mhm,
so those are second party signals. That's where we started. And then
mm,
there's those like third party signals, right? So that's going to be things that are layerable on top, right? So that's that intelligence that you bring in through what kind of job listings is this company? What are they hiring for, right? If they're
mm,
hiring, if you're again going back to selling developer software, if they're hiring for 50 new developers to like build a specific new product line, and you're selling developer software that talks about like setting up guardrails in the right way for people that are joining a team, then like that's probably something you want to know. Job listings, someone who's like really hiring deeply for something that you sell in order to support that motion inside their organization is really important. Tech stack, right? What is in that person's tech stack? What's complementary that they use that your product pairs really well with? Recent job changes, company news, right? Like, did they just acquire a whole new company? Are they merging? Are they expanding? Did they name a new SVP of product? And how does that affect what you do as your own company? So all those signals, right? That type of intelligence, the way that we see intelligence from a modern go-to-market point of view is grown out of the way that we looked at community intelligence when we first started, which is ultimately from those second party signals, those social, those chat, those forum, those community spaces. How do you make sure that you resolve all of those identities across those touch points into one person so that you can understand how that person truly has interacted with you, right? What is their sentiment? What have they asked you over time? What have they liked? Have they ever given you user feedback, product appreciation? Um, Ultimately, have they ever tried out your product, right? What are they doing inside your product? And then applying that person level intelligence and rolling it into that account level intelligence. So, what is their title? What is their role? Were they a product user at a previous organization? How have they, who else are they connected to in that organization? So that when they moved roles, you're like, okay, we actually are running an expansion motion with success teams. So now how do we activate that previous product champion and ask them, say, hey, can you help us connect with so and so on your new team? And we have great solutions for success teams, and we'd love a warm introduction. So that same way that we look at intelligence for community is really how we expand it into this broader goal of addressing intelligence for the whole go-to-market motion, all the way from pre-sales, pre-prospecting, right? Like, who should I prospect into, why, and why now, all the way to post-sales, being like, we need to earn this person's renewal, and in order to earn that, we have to know what they've asked. We have to know when we've answered it. We have to know what they've hoped for to be delivered. How fast did we deliver it? And then did we solve their issues, right? Are they is there are they do they have positive sentiment? Do they have to ask the question again? So I think all of those sorts of things for us is how we look at intelligence, which is understanding the individual person and how they fit into that landscape of the account.
Yeah, that I think that that makes sort of sense. I think um, the one thing that comes to my mind is like we within this sort of like context, there's a lot of orchestration needed, right? There's a lot of like, okay, we have so many signals in general, and uh, there's a lot of like tools that you can bring in to like find decision makers. For example, with a clay context, right? And then you have to pipe that data into a CRM. And I think like one thing that comes to my mind is like, what are the teams that you're seeing now that are sort of like managing this motion? And yeah, just like any customer intel that you've been sort of like seeing, and like with this shift of this new stack within go to market, that like you see a lot of people using common room, and you see people using clay together to like, and then send it to CRM. And what are the people that you're seeing like being mostly successful in this?
Yeah, actually, I'm so excited about this, right? Like, we see I think we see like two, there's like the user practitioner and then there's like the Wizard of Oz, but I think the Wizard of Oz actually, the wizard is sort of like a negative character. So I mean the positive Wizard of Oz, right? Like the golden Wizard of Oz,
Yeah.
um, who we also see who's not necessarily the daily practitioner, but
Mhm.
they are pulling the levers in the background to make sure that the daily practitioners can do their work well without
Yeah.
having to do sort of um, that like that piping work, right?
Yeah.
And so I think I'll answer your question in two ways, which is we see that the rev ops, right, or marketing ops are people who are doing just magical work, being like, hey, we have assessed which plays are working really well, right? We are going to try 15 different plays. Four of them landed super well, two of them are crushing it.
Yeah.
So we're going to figure out to what level do we automate certain plays, because we now
Yeah.
know, we feel really confident that they work. And then to what level do we have, human touch, and then to what level is a completely like white glove,
Yeah.
um like a non-automatable whole experience, because we need to make sure there's like a human shepherd the whole way. And so those rev ops and marketing ops folks, they're doing a ton of both analysis of data in the background, but then they're also bringing those plays right into something like Common Room or building it in Clay, and they're saying, okay, now that we know that these plays work, we're going to set up in Common Room. We would call it our language, like as a segment, right, and or a workflow. So you're gonna have this, you're gonna set this entire thing up where it's like automatically, when someone reaches this criteria that you set on the back end and has a score, an organization score based on the criteria that you set, and a contact score, or a
Yeah.
person score based on exactly the criteria you set of like behavior and fit,
Hmm.
then automatically send those people into this segment that we're going to work off of, right? And then that segment would be federated out into individual, let's say, reps books of
Yeah.
business, right? They come in and they see their own personal segment, or SDR, BDR, book of
Yeah.
business, they see their own personal segment. And then they're able, those reps, instead of having to go ferret out all of that information and look in 15 different places to figure out who they should be talking to, why they should be talking to them, why their score is good or excellent, what's new now, what brought them in right now, what's the relevancy factor. They are served because of those ops people's
Yeah.
in the background. They are served that, essentially, that work down list, right? Where they're like, okay, this is Bruno Estrella, head of growth marketing at Clay. I want to know a little bit more about it, what he's done. I'm gonna like just click on Bruno's profile. I get to see every single post that he liked. I get to understand why his score is like now servicing him to me. I get to understand the why now. I see with the account that he works at. I know his previous job history. And I also see that Clay recently raised an incredible round of funding. Congratulations! And so, because of that, they might have opportunity to purchase new tools in their stack, and I know why mine fits in. And so, I think, for a really long way of answering your question, right? That end user of the product could be someone that's an SDR or a rep. They could also be me
Yeah.
as a community leader, understanding who is interacting in our Slack, and then how they're where they fit into both general sentiment, brand perception, but also how they fit into accounts that we're working in, or expanding in. That end user might also be a customer success person who is like, okay, I've set up my own books of business, right? Based on who we're looking to expand with, when our renewals are coming up. That end user might be a demand gen person. So now that, marketing ops is setting up different plays where they're like, hey, these are the specific target accounts that we have. And so we're actually going to pull a segment in specifically focused on when there is activity from these individuals in these target accounts. And as
Yeah.
demand gen, we're going to run plays through, like, back into LinkedIn campaigns.
Yeah.
So the end user, or the users, right? We see the enablers, the empowers of all that work, which are those, like, those ops people who should be heralded so much for what
Yeah.
they do. And then we see the actual, like, end product users, right? Who are doing the work, the practitioner day-to-day work
Yeah.
inside the tool itself. And I
Yeah.
imagine you're something similar. So
Yeah, I was gonna say for us it's like very similar. We have a lot of like the kind of like the automators in general, like the people that are actually like paying attention to the systems. We have like a GTM systems team here at Clay, right? That it's paying attention to like all of the data and cleaning the data and bringing into Clay all those like the messy data and cleaning it up and sending to wherever we want to send. And these are the people that like empower the rest of the teams to actually act on the right kind of the right account and the right targets, right? So yeah, it's very very similar. The one thing that we and typically within larger companies, these people are the revenue operations, marketing operations, GTM systems type of role. And as companies are on earlier stage, these roles are not is not a thing this is not a thing within the smaller startups, right? Like it's typically this sort of like demand gen growth person that's like standing up these motions, and they are typically the ones that actually need to deal with this as like in the smaller startup setting. As companies grow and then you have to establish a focus area for these, then it starts to shift into towards the rev ops, marketing ops. So yeah, it's kind of like this orchestrator type of role.
yeah, and I
uh
think you're touching on, I think probably both of us get this question a lot, and maybe the audience is wondering it here, where they're like, "Hey, aren't like Clay and Common Room competitors?" And honestly, I think, but not just both of us, I think both of our organizations too are like, we love working with each other. And there's actually, first of all, there is so much space in this in the go-to-market motion tech stack
Yeah,
that 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 can be so much better. And I think one,
yeah,
we share that as a foundational point of view that we are making this space, we are offering tools and solutions to make this space better and the whole
yeah,
motion better and more intelligent. But also, I think you just touched on, we actually serve right now two pretty different markets in terms of the size of the teams or the size of the organizations. And I think that's even I think that's really illustrated, right, by the types of user. And I think both of the users who use both Clay and Common Room are super smart, super capable human beings who could use either or. Um, but it serves like a, I think there are different types of brains that it serves, right? One
yeah,
is sort of more of a GUI and one like a, a graphic user interface, and the other one is much more of like a iterative, like builder, it takes a different part of the brain.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, yeah, I think it's a better together story.
100% better together. Um,
uh, I know we. How
I
long do
know
we
we have
need?
like 5 minutes. So actionable strategies for growing a B2B community, or let's see if we get any, or let's do a actionable strategies for growing a B2B community. Let's see how many claps we get, or community strategy for maximum impact and metrics for success. Any votes with claps or thumbs ups about which of these we cover? One. We got a one. Actionable strategies for growing a B2B community.
Okay.
All right. Let's do it. Okay, there's all the thumbs.
Yeah. uh,
Um, Bruno, yeah,
yeah.
I would love to tee you up for this. Your creator programs, your expert programs are just so
Yeah.
brilliant to me. And one of the things that you all have said, I think it was Tommy that I had read it before, where he's like, and you said this, if they grow, we grow, right? And Tommy had said before, we really see it as a partnership, and your goal is to grow alongside your creators.
Mhm.
And so I'm curious if you can dive into some of those strategies for growing a B2B community.
Yeah, I think like the first thing that comes to mind is centralizing communication, right? For example, where do people spend time, like within your audience, right? Do they, in our case, they come to Clay. We offer support on in like regular email chat, but also on Slack. So they come to us and they are on Slack, right? So like that just becomes a easier way for us to communicate with these people with our customer base, right? So that naturally translates into like more like an intimate conversation that we have. And then since we have their attention on within that channel, how can we then? That's when, okay, let's actually build programs to enable these segments within our user base. And for example, on the creator side, these are people that want to get more integrated within the Clay ecosystem, right? Like how do they want to learn? They want to learn more about Clay. They have this passion about the product. They typically are within this like RevOps world, and they like this sort of like orchestration type of use cases. They most likely have a service around it, so they start there. And how can we actually grow with them? So after they are a creator, um, can can they become a Clay expert? Then after they become a Clay expert, can they become a Clay enterprise partner? And then we kind of grow with them in this case, which is like then we actually have like a much deeper partnership with them. Like we're the ones like giving them leads. We are helping them grow their business. We are providing resources for them. We're making connections with other people in the industry, and we actually dedicate like a ton of energy in this. But it's mostly like one, centralize the conversation in one place, more like tactically, right? Like it might be like a group somewhere. It might be like a WhatsApp group. It might be a different type of like it might be Discord. It might be like a different area. So centralize it, and then motions, dedicate energy, and build programs that will take people from like learning the product and learning your business into actually all the way like a really big expert, right? So this is more tactically how I think people should think about it. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, centralized communication is like uh spot on. Like number one, make sure everyone's talking in the same place. I think I also want to, and this is something that is a growth area that I think about all the time for Common Room in our Uncommon community. Is there is centralized communication, but then also this is something I appreciate about what you've done at Clay is then how to bring that centralized digital communication into the real world, right? And like really how to empower people to meet not just IRL to be IRL, but to show up where people already are, and that does feel different than just doing it in the digital space, but enabling people to meet other people in their own town, like essentially to bring that community
yeah,
outdoors, right? Where that community also feels like it's in person. And I think that's something that you all have stepped into in such an incredible way. Um, so centralizing that communication both digitally and
yeah,
even if you start small, even if you can't go global at the first time, right? In the first in 30 cities, it's like how find where your champions are, not only
mhm,
digitally, but find where those champions and those community members are location wise. And I think you can use both Clay and Common Room to do that. So try it out and then understand where those community members and champions are and then see how you can serve them not only digitally but see how you can serve them in their real world space as well and help them create those networks and those relationships to keep growing both digitally and physically. Hi
yeah.
Gina.
Hello, everyone. So, unfortunately, we are at time. Want to thank Rebecca and Bruno. What an amazing session, guys. Now, let's head over to our next talk on building a revenue team investors love with Tiffany Gonzalez and Lindsay Cordell.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Such a treat.